He did say he wanted to destroy the land of the sky, didn't he?
You want to create epic scenes like this in Blender? Well, let's get into it. So for shot 440, we start with these city models. I sort of copied Ian Hubert's method of creating cubes and beveling some edges with Ctrl B. Instead of using an image texture, I decided to go with a funky procedural shader. I used a Musgrave magic texture to color some of the windows of the brick texture, and for the rim lighting, I added a gradient emission and I mixed it in with a layer weight. Now it looks like this. Very fancy. For the terrain, I used a landscape add-on. I scaled the terrain to different heights and then used booleans to make cliffs. And to create the rocky surface, I used this Blender Kit add-on. The material used was Rock Alien 02, and for the silhouette we have this node set up. To light up this giant spike cliff, I added some green lights in the inside of the cracks and some orange lights on the outside. These foggy background clouds are actually a round cube with a wave modifier, a subdivision surface modifier, and a mirror modifier. For the shader, I mixed a swirly Musgrave magic texture with a gradient texture. I used a tutorial by Tuts by Kai to create these floating embers. You'll notice that these swoopy clouds kind of squash and squish around. To create this effect, I selected multiple clouds and I used individual origins to keyframe the scaling. To make the clouds follow these curves, I added follow path constraints. I set the path constraints to different offsets so that the clouds would float at specific intervals. And in the curve editor under path animation, I set the number of frames to 120. For the wireframe city, I used simple subdivision surface, then I added a wireframe modifier and an array modifier. Some of you may have noticed this ghoulish gore field lurking in the background. I used a simple deform modifier to make a twisting animation. In the world shading, I use a mix of emission and volume absorption. This gives the scene a foggy effect.
Now that's really cool.
In shot 441, I added a simple deform taper effect to my buildings. I added the same effect to these surrounding objects. For each of the objects, I set the axis of origin to the building object. I added these stacks of bricks by using array modifiers. These buildings are similar to the wireframe city, except under the wireframe modifier, the replace original box is left unchecked. To create an ocean, take an object and add an ocean modifier. To create waves, add a wave modifier. You can set the offset to a low negative number to make sure your waves are fully active when your animation starts, and adjust the position from where you want the wave to start. Great! That looks great! These loop-de-swoops, de-swoop-de-whoops, are actually just beveled curves. To get these neon signs, I use Sonic theme fonts, and I copied techniques from an Ian Hubert tutorial. I used shape keys to change the facial expressions of Knuckles and Tails.